Hello and welcome. My name is Leah Kopke, and this is my 3D modeling podcast, Ambient 3D Animations. For the last several episodes, we have been 3D modeling a library, and you can see where we're at right now. We 3D modeled this bookcase, the books on it, the blanket, the pillow, the tables, and today we're going to 3D model a wood-burning stove like the one you can see right here. So let's go ahead and jump into Cinema 4D and get started. Here we are. I have a new scene open. For my display mode, I have garage shading lines, so that's easier to see the edges of my model. I'm going to drop a cube into our scene. I'd like to just double check our dimensions here before I start dimensioning this cube. So I'll hold Control D, that would be Command D on Mac, and that would open up our project settings. And then my settings scale is set to inches, which is good. If I go into my preferences, I can see that for my units, our display unit is in inches, so that looks good. That's what I'm working in today. You can work in something different if you'd like, of course. This is just what I'm using. And just to make sure that's all saved, I'm going to click Save one more time. Now for our cube, we're going to need to adjust some of the dimensions. So for the X, I'm going to put in 23. For the height, I'm going to put in 36. And for the depth, I'm going to put in 21. So this is going to be a pretty small wood-burning stove. We've 3D modeled a wood-burning stove in the past. It was actually one of my first videos here on YouTube way back in the day. And for right now, I'm just doing a little bit of a different version of one for this situation. And once we've done that, I'm going to make sure that this is named. And we'll go ahead and make it editable by hitting the C hotkey. I'll hit the middle mouse button to go into the 4 views, hit it again in the right view so that we make this nice and big. And that way we can make sure that this all lines up nicely with the floor, as well as move the axis down. So the reason why I put in those dimensions there isn't because I'm expecting our wood-burning stove to be exactly those. It's just so that I know that it's in the relative correct size for what we're creating today. It makes it a bit easier. Now for something like this, I find it easier to move objects when the axis isn't actually in the center and it's snapped to the bottom. So I'm going to turn on our snap settings right now, and we may turn on quantize in a little bit, but what we want to do is have this snap to the work plane. So this looks good. And in order to move the axis and not just move the entire object and snap it to the work plane, we're going to enable the axis here. The hotkey for that is L as well. So I'm just going to move this down. And if we're lucky, it'll snap here. It looks like it is snapping, but not to what we want it to. So sometimes it helps to turn off other options to just make sure that we are really snapping to what we need to. So now you can see that we are snapping to that point there. So this is lined up. And you can see that this polygon isn't exactly lined up now. So that's a problem. But if I go ahead into polygon mode and I just select all of these polygons here, hit the E hotkey, turn off the enable axis here for a moment. We can actually snap this to the polygon. So I'll turn back on the polygon snap and snap the enable axis to the polygon, or we could even snap it to the edge here. So I'll turn on the edge just for a moment. And now I can move the whole thing and snap it to the bottom. So it was a little bit of going back and forth because I didn't line that up exactly. But now everything is perfectly lined up with the floor because we used our snap. And I have a whole other episode that goes through all of the settings for the snap if that's something you're interested in. I'll leave a link to that below. So this is our base shape. Now, something that I had done was I really liked this section here to be scaled in a bit. If I hold down Shift, I can use quantize and snap to increments. So I'll just scale this in a little bit, let's say 80%. I think that profile looks nice. We can use the hotkey ML for loop to create loops, and we've gone over this tool, the loop path cut, and that just makes it easier to add loops to our model. I'll do this in edge mode. If I hold down Shift, you can see that I have the snapping to increments here. I'm going to snap this to the center and click, snap this to the center and click. Now we have loops going all the way around here. I can also snap here, and snap here, snap here, snap here. Now this is just a really easy way to eyeball it and make sure that it lines up exactly. If you want to put in an exact distance, you can also enter in a dimension here. But I was okay with just snapping that there, and that seems good to me. Now we're going to need some legs here. And I'd like to go ahead and make that happen. So I'm going to click on all of these, and I'm just going to move it up 5 inches or so. We can actually turn on quantize and change this to 1 inch and check that on. And then when we move this, it moves in increments like that. So if we wanted it to be a different number, we could. And then we can go ahead and click on these 4 areas here and use the hotkey MT for the extrude. So now we're bringing up the extrude tool, and we can extrude this and hit apply. I'm going to use the T hotkey in order to scale these out a little bit. I may turn off the quantize for a moment here because it also does affect scaling, and I don't want to scale it a certain amount. Something like that looks good. And then for this side, I'll have these come out just a little bit. So this is our basic form. It's good to start with the large shapes first. They're easier to work with anyways. We have some nice feet for our wood burning stove. If you'd like them to be a little bit narrower, you can of course scale them in individually. And if you want to do that, you can use the hotkey M, and you'll see the normal scale option, and that's the, I think that's called a hyphen. So we'll select that, and then you can scale them in individually like that if you'd like to. I think that actually looks nice. So I'm going to keep my feet like that. You can make the feet of your wood burning stove however you'd like. I'm going to use ML to put in another loop here. And I want it to be lower here. This is so that we can create a dustpan for when you're cleaning out the wood burning stove. And now that we've done that, we can go ahead and grab these, use the hotkey MT, and we can hold Control, and that'll help us scale this out in the normal direction. If I hold Shift, that will enable quantize, and now we're moving in increments of 1 inch, since that's what I have set for my quantize options in the settings. And I'll make this about 6 or 7 inches. That feels good to me. And this is your own personal preference of what you like. So you can't really go wrong here. It's your own creativity coming into this. And for the inset, I use the hotkey MW. And with preserve groups on, I can inset this entire thing here like that. But I want to just have this part here create an edge, and I don't necessarily want to have this angle here. So I'll actually hit undo, and I'm going to use ML to create a loop. I'll create a loop here. And I'll also create a loop over here. Actually, if you want these to be symmetrical on both sides, we can turn on the symmetry and just make sure to have the X selected so that we're just affecting the symmetry that way. And then it'll add it to both sides, which is really nice. And I'll make this a distance of 0.5 out. And I can do that here as well. And now I'm holding Control while having these two polygons selected, and I can just drop this down. You can see we're moving this in increments of 1. If I'd like to move this back up again a little bit, I'll go into here and I'll move that back up. So there we go. I just adjusted that in the dimensions and the coordinates over there. So that's always there as an option for moving things around. And as you're working, you might look at these proportions and want to make adjustments to them. And that's totally okay. That's what I meant by the overall dimensions I was adding in are just a good starting point. It doesn't mean that it has to be that. Like, I feel like this feels better with it further up off the ground since it's going to be hot. And that just seems safer. And I'll add an ML. Click ML for loop path cut. And if I hold Shift, I can snap to increments. We can click right here. And we're going to need a door for the front. So I can click on those two polygons. And we're going to need to separate this from the whole mesh. So I can right-click on this and choose Split. The hotkey for that is UP. And you can see if I hide the new one here, it's separate from the rest of the wood burning stove. So that was our goal. The door is separate. And now I can go ahead and rename this door. And I'll hit save again. so we don't lose our progress if anything were to happen. And for the door, I'd like it to be a little bit more detailed, so I'm going to go ahead and use inset, this time MW, and I'll inset this about 0.5. I have preserve groups on so that we inset both polygons together as a group, and I'll hit apply. So this is looking good, and I'm going to just hold control to inset this a little bit so that it looks like the glass is going in a little bit, and I think that looks nice. We're going to need some kind of handle on this. And we're also going to need a flue for the top. It's helpful to look at wood burning stoves online. I looked at a few before we started 3D modeling this, also to get an idea of the dimensions. I looked up dimensions of different types of wood burning stoves so that I know that this is something that can feel real when we put it in a room, like it has close dimensions. It's good to look that up beforehand. It doesn't need to be like what exactly exists out there, but it's good to base it somewhat on what's existing so that it's believable. For the door, I think it would be really nice to have it swing out from the side. So I'm going to actually move the axis up and to the side over here. So the thing about the door is, if you were to ever rig this object, because you can rig objects as well as 3D models of people, then if you choose to rig this and have this rotate outwards, the idea is if we turn off the enable access and just rotate this, it'll move like that if you were to ever rig this, which will be nice, feel a little bit more natural. So we'll need the handle to go over here. Going to hit the middle mouse button to see all 4 views. Go into the top view with the middle mouse button again and zoom on in here. Going to use the pen and I'm just going to draw the shape of a handle. Something like that, and we can check it from the other views. So you can see it's a little bit low, but that's okay. We're going to drop in a circle. This is going to be our profile. And this is going to be our path. And I want to make this profile a little bit smaller, so let's try 0.25 for the radius. Just going to move this over here. And once we do that, we can add in a sweep. So we've covered the sweep tool before. All of these tools we've used so far we've covered in the past. You can check out the episodes on them if you're interested. I'm going to change the direction of this circle. Let's try this. So I usually just click these until it looks right. So the XY was the right direction. And I'm going to name this handle. And we can also check it in this view. It helps to look at your work from all views. Going to click on details. You'll remember from the previous episode that we can adjust the scale here. So if I wanted to start off thinner and then get thicker, I can just adjust this curve to make it any shape that I see fit. And that's really the fun of this, is getting into the settings and adjusting things to what you think looks good. I might keep it on Bezier, but change this to uniform so that it's easier to control the shape of the handle, and that'll make it easier to control this. Because it makes the points evenly placed. And when the points are evenly placed, then you can more easily adjust this. Ooh. Going to try 0.5. Maybe 0.3. And I'll increase the number of points just to smooth this out a little bit. So there we go, we have our handle. And since we built that in a procedural way, you can change your mind and redesign it at any point. I'm going to move the axis here so that it lines up a little bit better with the handle itself. I'll turn off enable axis so that I can move it again as one group. And if I want the handle to move with the door, I will put this within the hierarchy of the door so that if we rotate this, it all moves together. I'm thinking I'd like this to have maybe some more nice details on it, just to add some interest. It's a very minimal design, and minimal designs are fantastic, of course, but I like some ornamentation myself. You can do whatever you'd like. So I hit MW, and I'm going to hit apply so that we inset this a bit, and I'll just move this in. So I think that looks nice and add some more detail. And also, when you're working with sheet metal, if you have some bends in the metal like this, it actually adds to the strength, especially when it's being heated up. So I think this is just a good idea for design purposes. I'm also going to do this on the back, so I'll hit apply again and move this in. If you'd like to add some thickness to this, you can go ahead and take a look at the thicken generator here. We've also talked about this a little bit. I'm going to drop the body of the wood burning stove in there, and you can see it kind of puffed up a little bit. It's a little bit too much. I'll just add in a thickness of 0.05. You can see that's looking nice. If we were to open up this door, you'll see it a little bit more. I did not rotate that the right way. Actually, I want the thickness to be a little bit more. That's way too little. Let's see 0.1. 0.4, 0.5. So that's a 0.5 thickness. That would actually be something interesting to measure, what the thickness would be. The interior doesn't need to be very detailed because for this, we're just going to build a fire in here perhaps and add in some wood. So it can be pretty minimalistic on the inside. You could see that we have these holes in the corners for where the feet are. So I actually have an idea for how we can go about fixing that. I'm going to go back over here, turn off the thicken, and I don't really need this part of the foot, so I'll delete it, delete, delete, delete. And it's done that symmetrically since we have the symmetry on. I want to fill in this hole here. So I'm going to use MB in edge mode. MB is the hotkey for the bridge tool. And I'll click on the 2 polygons I'd like to bridge and I'll go ahead and bridge them right there. And that should have worked for both sides, and it did, which is great. I'll do the same thing here. We can try turning on the thicken again, and now you should be able to see that those holes are closed. So that looks good. I think I'm going to have the clamp there. So this looks better. I think this needs some bevels on it for sure. So I just dropped the bevel deformer within here. I want to adjust the offset. This is a little bit too much. I'll try 0.2 and I'll add in some subdivisions so that it's nicely rounded. And this is all procedural, so you could adjust the bevel again later if you wanted to. Maybe I'll try 0.1. This is looking much better. And if we'd like to add the bevel also to the wood burning stove door, we can just hold Control and duplicate it and put it in here. And you can see this is being beveled. If we would like to also thicken it, can copy the thicken, delete what's under it, and use this one for the wood burning stove. And I'll just move the handle over here. Now the only problem with this is that when we do that, the thicken doesn't necessarily have the axis in the correct place. So I'm actually going to move this all out, put the thicken within here so that I can hit reset transform and just zero it out. And then I can put everything back in there, because when you zero it out, it's basically moving the enable axis. So now you can see it's in the right place again. And I can move the door. I might need to adjust the position of that handle a little bit though. That's not too bad. Just move that in. I'll name these accordingly. And now for this top part here, we're going to need a hole for the flue, the pipe that comes out. So in order to do that, I'm going to want to use the fit circle option, but I'm going to need more polygons. So I'd like to add in more subdivisions to the top here so that we could add the flue or the pipe that goes in the top here. So I'm going to use ML with edge mode on. And for symmetry, I think I'll just keep the X on for right now. I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm just going to create loops here that are symmetrical. This will make it easier to work with. And then when we select these polygons here in the center, to use the fit circle command, it just looks much nicer. I want to make sure that I really have everything selected here though, because it looks like it's not even. And since I have the symmetry on, you can see that it is symmetrical. That looks good. I want this to be perhaps a different size. I'll just eyeball it for right now, and then I'm going to drop in a cylinder, adjust the cylinder radius to be about 3, and I'm going to use that as a reference for the size of this circle. I'll just scale it in to be about that. And I'm going to hide the cylinder. Click on this here and delete it. It doesn't look perfectly circular, so I'm just going to adjust that again with the fit circle, and then I'll delete it again, making sure that I have only selected what I need to. Seems like I have more selected than what I need to. I'll turn off the symmetry for a bit. That can sometimes cause some issues. So there we go. That's a pretty nice circle. Circles can be difficult to make in 3D, but that looks good. And then if you want to make the flue for this, you could of course use a cylinder depending on your room. If you want the flue to be able to bend the pipe, then you could also go ahead and instead of using a cylinder, we can go into the side view. I'm using the middle mouse button again, and we can just draw something with the pen tool. So I'll go in here. Here we are, spline pen. We've gone all over all the hotkeys for this and such, but we could just start drawing something here. And maybe we have this bend and then go up again. Going to redo that. So we can make something like that, and then we can make our profile with a circle, make this 3-inch radius, and we'll need a sweep once again. And with the sweep, I'll add in our circle, I'll add in our spline. And we'll need to adjust the orientation to make sure that's looking good. You can choose what type of spline you would like to have. If you want to make this editable, you can right click on it and say current state to object. That will make a copy of this. And I'll hide the old one. This is our copy. This is a polygonal object that we can click on. So then if you want to go ahead and select some of these loops using UL, loop selection, and then you can use UF to fill here, and then you can use MT to extrude this out a little bit. I just think that looks nicer to kind of work with it like that. You can make adjustments to this. Look like it's a little bit thicker there. Okay. I went ahead and started adding some materials to this from here, from the asset browser, like we've talked before for the couch, how to do that. And I thought that I should show you something. So if you're having trouble adding glass to just this part here, when the thicken kind of changes that, you can see when I turn that on, it's hard to see it as clear. It's okay to just right click on this and then hit split so that you have two parts here, and this one can be just the glass. And then this part here can be the rim that goes around. So I separated those two. And then that makes it a little bit easier to work with. They're still both within here. And then I also moved the handle on the outside so that the thicken isn't thickening the handle. In order to have them move together, we can just zero out this null here and use the null to control all of these objects in one. And I'll name this door control. And there you have it. So that looks quite a bit better. And since we made this pretty modular or pretty parametric in the way we 3D modeled it, if you do find that you want to make adjustments to even its shape still, you can do that even though we've added bevels to this. Like I could choose to move that in. And even make that symmetrical. And I think that actually looks nice, that little bit of detail there. It looks a little bit more ornate. And yeah, I hope that that tip is helpful for you while you're working. And I think this will look very nice, especially when we add a fire in here. I'm interested in getting into pyro since now we have a wood burning stove and we should have a fire inside of it. So we'll probably go ahead and do that. You can texture this any way that you'd like to, any color, any type of metal. So you can go ahead and have some fun with that. I really enjoyed 3D modeling with you here today. I hope you enjoyed it as well. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit like and subscribe and ring the bell so you'll be notified when the next episode comes out. And we'll continue working on this project together. Thank you so much for taking the time to 3D model with me. I hope to see you here again soon. See you next time.